charging straight in towards the enemy.
Welcome back to the analysis desk with Jintan, RocketX, and myself, Apophany. We saw the return of the TFI cores last match. This match, we saw the Brutix team from TISHU against the more standard TFI core. What are your thoughts, Jintan, on bringing battle cruisers, specifically T1 and Navy variants, without the T2 resistance to the command ships in a tournament setting?
I think it's generally a terrible idea. There's literally no reason to do it. You can get about the same, you can get better range and probably better application and better control from 2 battleships than you can from 3 battle cruisers, and it leaves you points to spare. Anyone who brings T1 battle cruisers is someone who looks at EFT, sees the numbers and thinks,
fast and
that's
they do
great.
Damage, like what more do you want, right?
Yeah.
They can even do links, right? But no, T1 battlecruisers are not great ships for the tournament meta. RocketX, I mean, you saw that match, a very solid, what we probably assume to be quite standard TFI team from the Afterlife. What do you think about the choice of using Deacons, actually, from TISHU? Do you think that T2 logistics frigates are going to be particularly strong this far this year? They haven't been doing so well.
Well, I mean, they do put out a lot of rep, but the problem is they're always very, very squishy, and you have to have a lot of rep bots to keep them alive. Without that, they just die. I mean, the main problem you have really with the Logifrigs is the range on them. They have to be in fairly close and local to whatever they're repping. And like obviously, if you've got 2, which you're probably going to have in a team that's using frigate-sized logistics ships, you're going to be in a situation where they need to stay close to each other as well, which is very, very difficult as a pilot. So it's a difficult team to fly. It's maybe not as solid as if you had a dedicated logistics cruiser there instead. We'll see where it goes though.
Yeah, now, Jintan, TFI core, really standard last year. Again, this year we're seeing it make a comeback in the last 2 games. Would you give us just a brief rundown of what the TFI core team is, how it works from the TFIs through the EOS, Logi, the T3Ds, the bombers, maybe a crew or 2?
Yeah, generally what you'll do with a TFI core is you'll have 2 TFIs. Sometimes you'll have a second vanilla Foon in there as well. That's up to you. But what you'll do is you'll use the T3D core to be a very strong either anti-support or support core in itself. So you either tackle primaries or you kill things that are coming in to tackle your logistics. And you can do that, and because the Typhoons apply their damage very well to other cruisers and other battleships, they can just fire on their own. This forces the split fire the split reps that we talked about earlier, which puts a lot of pressure on the enemy logistics. So all it takes is 1 slip up and you start losing ships, and once that snowball starts, it just doesn't stop. So TFI core is just a nice standard thing, and that's one of the most important, one of the reasons why we're going to see it so often early on in this tournament, because it means you don't have to actually bring out a new setup. Everyone knows it.
Yeah,
it's a known quantity.
Really. It's something to work from, and again, use it as a baseline setup. Test your other setups against it, see what does well, see what doesn't well. It's probably a very good testing strategy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about the TFI core team is just so broad, as you were saying, in terms of it doesn't really have a huge weakness in terms of matchups. Yes, it has weaknesses and there are ways to beat it, but it's not a very specific pointed, it's good against this and bad against everything else. The TFI team you can test against everything. Every setup you need to bring this year has to be able to beat a TFI team. They were so popular last year, you have to expect them to be shown at the very least in the first weekend this year, and as we're seeing them making a comeback here. Our next match coming up is going to be, if I look at my screen here, we have Circle of 2 versus COF Alliance. Circle of 2 had, I believe it was a 2nd place finish a number of years ago, and they've never really been able to live up to that height again. And then COF, a brand new alliance in the tournament. RocketX, do you have any thoughts on either of those teams? Do you know anything about them on TQ?
Yeah, well, I mean, CO2's been in the spotlight recently for the part it played in World War B, initially starting on the CFC side, the Imperium side of it, and then later switching and just stepping out of that kind of level of politics completely. It's interesting to see them take another shot at the tournament this year. They've switched their stance politically in EVE quite a lot, and you know they're now able to dedicate time to the tournament.
Maybe coming out from under the yoke of Imperium oppression, they can strive towards victory in the Alliance tournament once again. something like that. Jintan, do
Along
you have any
those lines.
thoughts on either of these two teams?
Yeah, obviously CO2 are one of those non-English speaking teams that we hear a lot about. They're from the Balkans, so Croatia, that kind of area. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to see some interesting comps from them. Just because, like, probably not now, but probably as the tournament goes on, as that's generally what they do. I've never heard of COF, and I look forward to seeing what they do though. And in fact, I'm going to put my money on them this round. Yes.
Okay, what about you, Rocket?
I'm going to go with what I know and go with CO2.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we've still got a little bit of time for the match. It's about 10 minutes before the match is scheduled to start. So I think if it's okay with the guys upstairs, we're going to go to a very quick ad break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back after the little ad break there. We're back with Jintan, Rocket X, and myself, Apophany. Let's talk a bit more about these two teams. COF Alliance, formerly a feeder corp for Drop Bears, they were part of the whole Brave group that cooped before it was cool, if you will, and they moved off and they're doing their own wormhole thing. I'm wondering, the CO2 flagship choice, the Armageddon, most people are going for the BAL. Both of them are roughly based on the same hull. They're both big newt ships. The BAL obviously gets the web bonus. Jintan, why would you choose the Armageddon as a flagship over the 2-point reduced pirate webbing BAL?
The reason you use that, the reason you use it is rather than getting a web range bonus like the Valgorn does, you get a newt range bonus as well as a newt strength bonus, and that gives you effectively the ability to control a Valgorn on the enemy team. So it's basically used as an anti-Valgorn flagship. If you're expecting a field like this AT's field is absolutely filled with Valgorns and you want to negate the strength of it, what you can do is you can bring in Armageddon, you can fit X-type or Officer Newts to it, and you can newt it from outside of its range. And that's very powerful because obviously we've talked a lot about control and keeping things at arm's length whilst your DPS does the work to it. That's exactly what you want to be doing to the Balgorn, because if it gets on top of you, you are not having a fun day.
Yes. Rocketix, what are your thoughts on kind of the change in newts? I remember last year we were still under the old newt system whereby your newts worked until they didn't. You had the very fixed specific range of them. Nowadays we have full off.
Yeah. So, well, one thing that you're looking at, especially with flagships, is you basically looking at X-type modules. So although neutralizers now have a decent range, I think it's like 32 or something along those lines, you will get performance out to about 40, maybe 45. Obviously, the further you go into that fall off, the less effective those are going to be. The Geddon would then have the extended range over the Balgorn, but then you've got the different way that NOS works on a Balgorn, because if on a normal ship, if you're using NOS on a target that has less cap than you, you're not going to get as much cap. It's not going to be as effective. They're less effective if your target has less cap than you. With a Balgorn, it just keeps on sucking, is the best way I could put it, really, until the enemy's cap dead. So although you've got the Geddon that can put out that newt power and project it to such range, the Balgorn's NOS may be able to keep its cap alive. Whether it's going to have enough cap left to do anything with its newts to the rest of the team, it depends on how well the Geddon's doing, really.
I mean, Jin's...
I want to actually talk about that, about how capacitor warfare has changed in between these, because obviously we saw the buff to large cap batteries in general between this tournament and the last. So that's actually a very strong change. It enables a couple of different fittings, for example, the Regen Onyx, because they provide a resistance to capacitor warfare. And I think that's actually, capacitor warfare is one of the things we're going to see really dominate this tournament. It's obviously with the points reduction on Balgorns, making them on the same level as a fleet ship, we're going to see a lot of capacitor warfare this tournament.
Okay, well, with that, we are going to go into the next match. It is COF Alliance versus Circle of Two. No idea who's going to win. Let's go into that match right now.